Okay, so here we are on the tutorial page in Canvas, and I'm going to go ahead and get started down the page. Couple of things just to note before we get in here is that if you are going to complete this tutorial, you're going to add a document to your testing folder. So everyone should have a testing folder where you are experimenting, trying new techniques, doing our tutorials, etc. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be creating a new folder with a subfolder in my testing folder for type. And then I'm going to create a new HTML document for this tutorial, and I am then going to copy the code that is here inside of Canvas, and I'm going to be pasting that into the HTML document that I'm going to be creating. So I've selected it already here inside of Canvas. I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and then when I swap over into Dreamweaver, I'm already going to have that copied and ready to paste directly into that document. So I'm going to switch over into Dreamweaver right now. Here I go. And inside of Dreamweaver, let me go ahead and clean up my space. I have already left my website and I have come into my tutorials and testing in here. And what I would like to do once I'm inside of my tutorial and testing folders, I'm going to find that root folder that's up here at the top, and you're going to have other subfolders already, but this is a new testing folder for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to be creating a new folder. Everybody would be doing this at home, and I'm going to call this type. This is going to be a folder dedicated to any tutorials that I might be completing that are going to be experiments in working with typography. And inside of my type folder, I'm going to right click again and I'm going to create a new file this time. I'm just going to go ahead and name this type.html as well. You could call this something like non-standard type or non-system fonts or whatever you want to call it, but I'm just going to follow my own instructions right now. So once I have my type file, I'm going to open it up by double-clicking on the icon. And when I get into my document in here, I can see that I have my HTML document, which is broken down into the head, the communicator, and the body, which is the visible portion of our web page code. So in between the body tags is where we put everything that we want people to see on our web page. I'm going to go ahead and just paste the information that came from the Canvas document, which is the code that serves as the basis of this document. I'm also going to take this and select all of the code that I just copied in here. And I'm going to go over to my little sidebar, and I have an icon over here where when I click on it, it says Format Source Code. And when I do that, what it's going to do, it's going to put everything into the proper nesting order. I'm doing this just to kind of clean it up a little bit. I'm also going to indent just a little bit. And I'm not going to be working a lot with my code in here today, so this is as far as I need to go. But if I was working on this, I would actually be kind of separating my content out line by line into the bundled information. So for instance in here, right, so once I get down here, I can see then that I have an H1, an H2, a paragraph, and on and on. When I get down here into the unordered list, I can see my 3 list items as being separate items that are nested within the unordered list. I really think it's important for us to spend a little bit of time whenever we are adding code or working with HTML and CSS to make sure that our code has been formatted in a way that helps and serves us as the editors of that code so that we can very easily and clearly see the code that we're working with. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that that looks right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at it in live view. And this is what our document is going to look like until we start to modify the presentation of the type. Let's go ahead and give that a save right now. File, save. And then we're going to swap back over into Canvas and see what our next step is. So now that we're back into Canvas and we have our document ready in Dreamweaver, we're going to go ahead and take a look at using Google Fonts as a font hosting service. So the first thing is we're going to go over and connect with Google Fonts in a separate tab or window. And I want to give a brief introduction to like what Google Fonts, how to use this. It's actually a new version of Google Fonts, so if you've been here before, things have changed a little bit from likely the last time that you used it. So over here on Google Fonts, let's get a quick rundown on how this website works. We can search for type choices by name. We can type something like maybe it's the name of our website, or anything else that we want to preview the type choices setting. We can also change things like the scale of the preview in here if we were specifically focused on display copy. So this would be like a headline, like the name of our website. We would likely be seeing it at a larger font size, so we could preview it at a different font size. And then we also down here have options for limiting what the results are going to be. So we can choose based on sort of a very loose type classification. We could choose based on language support. So if we were trying to serve up a site for Arabic speakers, then we could choose or we could limit our offerings to fonts that actually have support for Arabic characters. There's a whole long list in here, so that's really helpful. And then we can also look at things like font properties. So if I wanted to make sure that I was choosing a type family that had multiple styles applied to it, so I could have variation within a single type choice, then I might be wanting to limit this based on the number of styles that are provided. So let's say that I choose this or I set this to be 4+. It means that I only want them to give me back results that have at least 4 distinct type styles. And that might be something like an italic version, a bold version, an ultralight version, and maybe it would be a bold italic. So if having variations in that type choice is important to you, this is where we would want to set the limit on that. Thickness would just be like how bold is the stroke, how heavy is the stroke. These are the strokes in here. It's basically what we think of as being what creates the character, but this is thicker strokes than this is. So if thickness was important, I would limit based on that. Slant would be like what we think about as being sort of an italic presentation, and then the width would be like the width of the characters themselves. I'll keep this limited based on the number of styles because I think that that would be most important for me. Now, as I go through here, let's just say that I come in here and I choose to get display type. I'm looking for something for a headline right now. I could cruise through here and as I go, I'm going to see the presentation of my own text content up here in the custom field. And let's pick one that we just want to go in and take a look at. So I'm going to go into the Play Fair display. And when I click on this, it's going to take me into a page devoted specifically to this type choice. Now what we're going to see in here is that we're currently setting the type at 30 pixels. I'm just going to increase that a little bit so we can see it better. Now as I go down, I can see in here that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different styles to choose from. Now I don't actually have to take all of them. If you look over on the right hand side of the screen, I can pick and choose which styles in this family that I would like to take with me and use in my own website design. Notice that they have names and they also have numbers applied to them, and the number corresponds with the weight or the boldness of the style. So 900 is the largest number in here. It's also the heaviest weight. Let's go ahead and take a look up here at the top where I have a regular at 400. So I don't have any light or ultralight styles in this particular type choice. And my lightest is still set to be a regular weight of 400. So if I liked these, I could select a few, which I'll come back and do in a moment. Now down here a little bit below, now I could either scroll down using my navigation in here, using the named anchors where we're kind of moving down the page. Glyphs is going to be the character set. So what all do I have available to me in this particular choice? Do I have characters that have accents on them? Do I have numerals? Do I have punctuation? So you want to take a good look at that. You can see that there's definitely support in here for characters that come from languages other than English. Moving down through about, there is the background in here about the type styling, its development, who the designer was, etc. The license structure in here, all of these are going to be listed under the open font license, which means that we can use them, the OFL, we can use those in our own products and projects, in print or digital, commercial, meaning like we're making money off of this product, or just for personal projects. You cannot take these font files and then sell them to another service, like Creative Market or something, and say that they're your own. That's really kind of the limiting factor here, but obviously we wouldn't expect that anyway. And let's see here. Down below is the last option, which is for pairings, and font pairings would be like for a headline and body copy. So this right here would be our headline, and this right here would be our body copy. And what they're offering to us over here on the left-hand side are some selections where we can preview, in this case, Playfair Display Regular. I'm going to go ahead and change that to semi-bold here. And Roboto is what my body copy is being set at. And it's also set at regular. Though I could say, what about if I had Roboto Light? How would that actually look in here? So here now I see semi-bold Playfair Display with Roboto Light as the body copy. And then they give us a number of other options here, also using very popular type choices from Google Fonts. If I liked these, then I could also go and collect those to use them in my site. In addition, I can also use the arrows here to swap them. So what we're seeing now is Roboto Light is on top with Playfair Display down below. Playfair Display is not looking so great as body copy. It's a little bit hard to read. So we're going to keep it as display copy, which means we're going to use it only for headlines. We'll go ahead and switch that up. Okay, so if I were to like this, I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up to selecting my styles. And if I wanted these, I could come over to the right and say select this style. When I do that, I see that a little window pops out from the side and that there is a selected family up here. I have a review button and an embed button. Not quite ready for that yet, but I can actually sort of store type choices over here. I call this my cart, where I'm shopping for fonts right now, but I'm going to really go through this list and cut out everything that I don't plan to use before I move back into Dreamweaver. So to close this down, I'm just going to use the X, and then I can tell over here in the upper right hand corner that I have stored or put some fonts into my shopping cart for right now that I can come back later and look at. Because of my tutorial using very specific typefaces, I'm going to go back to the home page and get ready to load those. So I'm going to come into the search field, and since I am looking for Merriweather, I actually first need to clear out all of my filters in here so I can get to it. Merriweather is what I'm taking in here and not the Sans version, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then moving down, the version that we're going to be taking is the 300 weight, so it is the light version of this. I'm going to go ahead and select this style, which has now been put into my cart. I'm also going to be taking another type choice with me today, which is going to be Blackhand Sans. So I'm going to go ahead and type in Blackhand Sans, and Blackhand Sans only has one style, so it has a regular 400. It doesn't have any other options. I'm going to go ahead and also select this style. Now that I have the styles selected that I know I'm going to be using for the tutorial, I'm going to come up to my cart, and when I look through here I can see that I have Blackhand Sans, Merriweather, I only have one style from each one of them, and Playfair Display with one style. If I had chosen multiple styles from Merriweather or Playfair, I would see all of them listed here, and each one of them would have their own, sort of delete from cart icon next to it. So I know I'm not going to take Playfair with me, so I want to get it out of here because otherwise a link to this font will be added in the code that I'm going to take from this page and put into my own website, and I don't want that. So I'm going to remove that, and instead I'm going to just be working with these two. I'm looking at that under review, but now I'm actually ready to go into embed. When I get into embed, I'm going to see two different gray boxes in here. One of them is going to be a link to an external style sheet, and the other one is going to be CSS rules that I can use in my style sheet to apply this type. Now, the link that we see up here is a little bit different than our style sheets. This isn't anything that you're going to be able to open and edit. This is actually that connecting piece that's going to connect our web pages to Google's CDN, or Content Distribution Network. So we're going to be using that inside of the head of our document to create the connection to their service. So the first thing that I'm going to do in here is I'm actually just going to go ahead and select it and copy that. I'm going to switch over into Dreamweaver now. And in Dreamweaver, I'm going to be going into the code view. Inside of the code view, I'm going up into the head. So remember that the head is the communicator. I'm going to go after the close of the title. I'm going to move to the next line, and I'm going to paste that link into the style sheet. You can see right here it's talking about it being a style sheet. And the other thing that you can see in here is that there's a mention of the Blackhand Sands and Merriweather. In Merriweather, we also see a 300 weight display. So what it's doing right here as the part of the connection is it's saying, hey, this site wants to use Blackhand Sands and Merriweather at 300 weight. So when somebody loads my HTML document, it's going to connect to Google Fonts. It's going to go find those two fonts to be able to be used inside of my website. Okay, so I've got my link in here, but I don't have a style sheet of my own. Because I'm doing this as a tutorial and it's a standalone, I'm going to be creating an internal style sheet for this page. On your website, you're not permitted to do that. All of your stuff needs to be put into an external style sheet. But for this project or this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and just create an internal style sheet right here. So what I have is I have the opening style tag and the closing style tag here within the head. Let's go ahead and swap back into Canvas to see what we do next. Okay, back into Canvas, we're going to go in here. What we have just done is we have brought in the code snippet that came over from the new Google fonts in here. And now when I am going back down the line, it says go back to Google Fonts and copy the font family CSS rule from the page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to be creating CSS rules for an H1 using Blackhand Sans, the H2 using Blackhand Sans, and the paragraphs are going to be using Montserrat. So what I'm going to be doing right now is going back in here, and what I see down here are the CSS rules for the specific families. So let's go ahead and start with the font family for Blackhand Sans. I'm going to copy that from here. I'm going back into Dreamweaver, and the first rule that I'm going to make is for my H1. I'm going to make a selector for H1, and then inside of my declaration block, I am simply going to specify that I want the font family for the H1 to be set at Blackhand Sans. I know that I'm also going to be doing this for my H2, so I could create that as a grouped CSS rule, but I might want to make their colors different, so I'm just going to separate them out so I could specify a color if I wanted to for my H1 and specify a different color for my H2. Now, I am going to come in here and just paste the same declaration. The last one that I was going to be making a rule for in here was going to be for my paragraphs, and I'm not going to be using the same property and value here, property of font family, value of Blackhand Sans or sans serif. So I do need to come back in to Google Fonts, and I am going to select the font family for Merriweather. And when I come back in to Dreamweaver, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. So taking a look at this, one of the things I want you to notice is that in both of these, we are given a font stack that has two options. Our first option is what it is that we want that we're bringing over from Google. And if for some reason that didn't work, it would default to whatever sans serif type choice is on the user's operating system. That's really critical that we use this. We're going to see that again when we get into Adobe Edge fonts. Let's go ahead and look at this in live view. What we saw was a momentary delay, and then it became active, and we see the Black Hand Sans, and we also see Merriweather here as the body copy for paragraphs. But one of the things that you should notice in here is that the content that is inside of the unordered list, so these are list items inside of the unordered list. The list items themselves did not draw that type because we made it specifically for paragraphs. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to work with Edge fonts here in Adobe, which is what we're going to be doing next. So working with Adobe Edge fonts. We are going to be applying that to the list items in the unordered list down here so that we can get our type styling. So the way that I'm going to do that is I am going to start by creating a CSS rule in the CSS designer for my list items inside of the unordered list. So over here inside of my CSS designer, one of the things that we're going to be able to see in here once I get this settled is that under sources I have a link right here to a style sheet, which is giving me my Black Hand Sans or the Merriweather type. These are both being generated from Google Fonts, and they're not editable. So they're here, we're going to see it inside of the sources. It's just a heads up that we have a link to that content distribution network that's being pulled in through this @FontFace declaration. So we don't need to mess around with that. We can't mess around with it anyway. We don't want to delete it. Now inside of the internal style for this page, or it would be your styles.css file or your external style sheet, we would be coming in here and adding in a new selector for list items when they are inside of an unordered list. The way that we are going to get into the Adobe Edge fonts is we are going to come into the type category. We're going to go to font family. We're going to click in the empty space, and these are those font stacks that we've been talking about. And what we want to do though is go all the way down to the bottom where it says Manage Fonts. From within Manage Fonts, what we can do in here is we start off first in Adobe Edge Web Fonts, where we can do something very similar to what we were doing inside of Google Fonts. We can filter based on text that is suitable for display copy, headlines, or body copy. And we want to make sure that we only have one selected at a time, but they could both be selected. We only want to have one though. And then we would see things that were identified as being purely or best suited for body copy in here. Or we could limit based on different sort of loose type classifications in here. So if I wanted to have black letter, or if I wanted to have handmade, they call this decorative, which we might have thought about as being display when we were over on Google Fonts. So I could pick a different type choice in here, which I will. So I'll come in here and just use maybe this Eclonica. So when I click on that, and I could click on a number of them if I was interested in many different options in here. I really could click on as many of them as I wanted to. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and choose one. And then what we see up here under Custom Font Stacks is that Eclonica has been added over here to the bottom right. These are all of the available fonts that are on my operating system. They're going to be different than the fonts that you might have on yours, specifically if you're coming from a Windows machine, because they use different vendors than Apple has used. What I need to do though at this point is I need to create a font stack, similar to what we saw when it said Merriweather, comma, serif, or when it said Black Hand Sans, comma, sans serif. We need to do the same thing here. So it's not enough just to have the type choice, but we also then need to select it, move it over, and then determine what of the final type classifications we would like it to default to if Eclonica was not available for some reason. I'm going to go ahead and just put this down as a sans serif, and I'm going to say done. Now that I have created that font stack, I actually need to come back in here and I can now choose it. Oh, looks like I didn't save it. So let me go back into Manage Fonts. I'm going to go back into my custom font stack. I've got my Eclonica right here, but I need to also come down here. I'll grab sans serif, move it over, and then let's go ahead and say done. Let's see if it shows up now. Coming over into default font, what I see here is Eclonica, which I had loaded originally, and then Eclonica sans serif. This is the one that we want, and you're going to see this when you load your own. You'll have an option for just the type itself, and then you'll have the one that is a font stack, and we need to choose the font stack. As soon as I select it and I move down, I can see that I have my new type choice has been loaded in here, and then if I go out and do a file, save all, I'm going to take this out and look at it online. Okay, so my document is loading up here inside of Chrome, and what I see are my non-standard type choices are showing up in here. Eclonica, we have Black Hand Sans, and we have Merriweather. Last note of importance as I move back into Dreamweaver here is that I want to show you what has happened inside of the code after adding in the Eclonica type. We ended up in the head of our document with a comment up here followed by a script, two scripts actually. So we have two scripts in here, and all of these have been generated through Adobe Edge fonts. So where we were given a link to the style sheet to connect with Google, here when we are trying to connect with Adobe's service, they are using JavaScript as their method for connection instead of working with an external style sheet. And then in between all of this up here, inside of my internal style sheet, you can see that all the rules have been created to style the different type elements. I hope that that was helpful for you and that you will be able to choose the service and method that suits your practice best.